Good morning, everyone. Yes, so welcome to a stunning new day, a stunning new morning. Yes, and today we are really, once again, we are excited to really discuss our discussion of this month with AWOKH. That is our discussion that we, on a monthly basis, we realize the importance of affecting what it is that we stand for, and we realize that it is important for us to honestly to not let go of where we are in season, but to allow ourselves, I always say, to continue to appear in season. And our appearance with AWOKH in season is really our voice with where we are at in season, and to allow ourselves the opportunity to really be motivated, to really stand for change, and to really be motivated to speak up for difference. And therefore, today we really focus on our discussion of existing to exist with people of color today. So, people of color today, we are focusing on a few things that I think is important for us during this season. And one of those things is our society, and I would have to say our society, because mainly our society during this season are being affected by many things and by many ways and by many differences and by many uniquenesses, that in this season we have to allow ourselves the time to get to know our changed society, to get to know the changed generation that we are currently living in. And I call today's discussion existing to exist, because once you get yourself the opportunity to get familiar with the society, with the community of change that you are currently in, you allow yourself to really appear with being who you are meant to be in your season. Because therefore you don't prevent yourself anyway with not understanding your society and therefore then fighting back. But when you allow yourself that opportunity to exist, and that opportunity to remind yourself that you are existing to exist, then you are allowing yourself the time to get to know and to get to understand your trends in season. And for us as a generation, we really have to make time to really make place to get to know our society during this time. We really have to allow ourselves the time to get to know and to find our space and to find ourselves in this generation, because this generation today speaks of many things that are sometimes challenging to us, and this generation today speaks of many things that sometimes challenges and that sometimes requires you to get to know you in a way that you are meant to know yourself in this season. I believe that we were all brought up with our differences, with our uniquenesses in our unique communities, with our unique religious ways. But we're in a generation where we're gonna have to get in line with where our generation is at, with getting in line with where our season is at, with getting in line with where our youth is at, with getting in line with our mental approach when moving forward in this generation. Because remember, we do not ignore that during this time there is a lot happening around us. We do not ignore the fact that during the season there's a lot of things that are challenging us in season. But in order for us during the season to be where we are required to be, and you know, AWOKH stands for something new. AWOKH has written something new. So in order for us to appear with the something new that we are every season, we have got to find ourselves in season in order to be there. And therefore, today, we really focuses on getting to know our society and getting to know our challenges and getting to find ourselves in season in order to make sure that we appear with the newness of us in season. Therefore, you don't appear with something that other people would reject because they are not familiar with, but they would get to familiar with your pace in season in order to be where they are at in season. and then we won't find ourselves in battles and in war with one another and in war with ourselves, but then we would find that freedom and that freedom approach with everything that we do, because we allow that time to get familiar with where we are at in season. And that is our discussion today. And our main point of our discussion today, our society factor and what we associate with in season, because the season comes with a lot of things, right? And in order for us to find ourselves in season, we need to know what is it that we associate with where we are at in season. And once you will find yourself associating with where you are required to be, then you find yourself appearing and prospering and mentally well and physically fine, because you have allowed yourself to associate with the you factor in season. Because there's a lot of requirements and a lot of people that requires you to really associate with them in season. It's like everyone would have to take someone else's hand in season, but you need to get familiar with finding you in season in order to know where to associate you, so that you don't find yourself at the wrong place at the wrong times. And therefore, existing to exist, our second factor is what is it that we associate with. And our third factor, therefore, focuses on our generational mindset and our generation of prosper. Our generational mindset is the mental state of our generation, because when we talk about the mind, we realize and we focus on the mentality of where our generation is at in season. And therefore, our third factor today that we will focus on is our generational mindset. And when we focus on the mindset of our generation, we would learn to know how we would be approaching our generation in season, when we are maybe stepping out, or when we are maybe being challenged, or when we are maybe free of this whole war environment, the COVID environment. Then you would get to know that your generational mindset is where you would find yourself at in a better state, and getting familiar with the mindset of your generation in order to know how to react with where you are at. And then our second factor, our generational mindset, includes our generational prospering step. And our generational prospering step is that freedom that you allow yourself, because you have gotten to know your people, you have gotten to know your community, you have gotten to know who you associate with, and you have gotten to know your society in season. And therefore, the fourth factor would be our socio-economy and our environmental factor. So I've included our socio factor, because you associate yourself, but then there's your environmental factors that you need to also know, that you need to take into consideration when it comes to association. And there's your economic factors that you need to also put into consideration when it comes to factoring where you associate with and our society and the togetherness of our society in this generation. So that is just where we want to start off today, and we really want to make time to really talk through this with everyone, so that we are all on one mindset and on one approach with our season of change, and with where we are required to be at with our generation of change that is ready to exist, and to make sure that we exist with that opportunity and with that mindset of prospering where we are at. So yeah, I'm just gonna allow ourselves the time to really understand our discussions in season, and we're gonna come back. We're gonna start with our society factor, and we're gonna come back to really talk about where did it all start for us, right? Because I remember that when we grew up, the only thing we can remember is the days when I can only remember the days when I really started to be educated, and the days that I really started to learn my school years. Those are the main things that I can remember from when I was young, right? So our society does not start now, and that's where I want us to really focus on, because we have to know that we started somewhere. And in order for us to know our space in this generation, we would get to back to where we have started from. And I always say that during the season, you need to allow yourself to take a step back. And a step back to me in this discussing today means that you're gonna have to go back to find yourself in where it all started for you, where you all remembered those things that you are required to remember in life, those life lessons that you were not taught to remember for a certain day, but those life lessons that you are required to implement in your life today. And that is for us important during this season. With saying this, I have noted that we need to be reminded that I have included the ABCDEF factor into this part of our society, because we're gonna focus now on our society factor. And our ABC factor this morning reminds me of the time that there was an implementation, right? There was existence, right? And the time that we need to be reminded of where we started, where our education started at, right? Our education for me did not start in primary school. Our education for me started in our household. It started in our first step of upbringing. Our education factor for me started in that first moment that you realized that there was family around you, right? Because when you learn to know family, you learn to feel that environment of protection. When you get to know family, you get to feel that environment of a society that you get familiar with. When you get to feel family, you get to realize that you are in an environment where you are safe, where you are fine, where you can be calm, and where you can actually be yourself. And therefore, with everything that we have been challenged with, we've realized that the moment that we stepped into the classroom, that the moment that we stepped into school was the moment that we had to challenge ourselves, because we were challenged by a different type of environment, by a different type of society, by a different type of people that you now are associated with, that you now find yourself in the same classroom as these people, in the same environment as these people, and you have gotten to know that your society is your family, is your neighbors, is your community, the people that you see every day. And now you get into the classroom. Now you're not only in the classroom challenged by getting to understand the A, B, C, D, E, F, H, but you get to understand the environment that you are in. So the challenge for us as young people then was, without realizing it, is we had to challenge ourselves, because we were now required to associate with a group of people that we don't really know. We were now required to communicate with a group of people that we didn't feel fine communicating in front of. We were now required to make visible a certain aspect and area of ourselves in our lives that we are not really usually making visible to others. We are now required to get to a space of mindset that you get to now learn another aspect of you in life that you sometimes find difficult to get to learn that aspect if you are surrounded by other people and by unknown people. It's one thing to be surrounded by other people, but it's another thing to be surrounded by people that you don't know, that is around you, that is in your classroom, and the teacher now requires you to learn at a certain pace, to learn with a certain group, and you yourself know that individually I know who I am, and individually I learn at my own pace, and individually I have gotten to know that my society, that my family understands and recognize me when I'm being educated in a certain way. But now I'm in the classroom. There is a different type of society that might be the same community, but a different group of people that I now need to associate with. And in order for me to associate in the right way, I would sometimes have to allow myself to take that step back and say that now I have gotten the opportunity to get to know myself, but now I'm in an environment that is unknown to me. I'm in an environment that there is war. I'm in an environment that there is different mental challenges. I'm in an environment that countries faces different challenges on a regular basis. And I myself have gotten to know me, but I have now got the opportunity to get to know my environment in order for me to understand and to know where I am at in this era and in this season. So I remember that for me it was very challenging because I individually always, and I realize that I'm always a person that does things on my own pace and on my own time. Yes, I really respect, but I always allow myself that time to get familiar with where I'm at. I always allow myself that time to get to understand what's happening around me. I always allow myself that time to sense where I'm at so that I don't find myself in a dangerous situation. I always allow myself some time to get to understand what is happening around me so that I don't find myself fighting things that are not there to harm me, but so that I really find myself protecting me in a protective way. And that is our society today. That is where we as a generation have to allow ourselves the time to really get to know our society, to really get to know the pace that our society are walking at, to really get to know the pace that our society has changed into, to really get to know that our society requires us to handle them in the same way that we have handled that situation when we went into the classroom at the first day in school, and that you were surrounded by all of these things, and that you have gotten to know family, and that you are now required to know family. We need to learn as a generation that our era 2022 requires us to know that there is war happening around us, that there is different mental challenges happening around us, that each country has got their differences, but we need to each allow ourselves that individual time to get familiar with sensing what is happening around us before you go and force someone else into reacting, before you go and force someone else into standing in a situation that is not really fine for them. And therefore we individually have that responsibility to get familiar with our societies, with finding ourselves in this generation, and with finding our space in 2022. And the only way that we can do that is to go back to the ABC factor when you enter the classroom, and when you realize that in this classroom there's many things, but the one thing that is required of me is that I'm gonna have to take a step back, and I'm gonna have to get familiar with where I'm at in order for me to make sure that I am fine with stepping into where I'm required to in the classroom. That is our mindset of change. That is where we start at when we come into a new generation, when we enter a new season. When a new season enters, I always include seasons in our discussions, because it is a requirement to understand the change in the atmosphere in order to understand how we need to implement change in our lives. And therefore, in that same approach, we would therefore, as a generation, be fine mentally, physically, emotionally, in order to find everyone fine in this generation. And that is priority for us with the first point on this discussion, is to know that our society is fine, and to know that we have allowed everyone that time to be fine, and to know that no one is in no one's space, but everyone understands that if you're going to react with a disrespectful way in my space, then you're going to have to find someone reacting towards you. And therefore, I say that when our society gets familiar with one another, our society, when we enter places that are sometimes challenging for us, and I'm going to discuss this now because I've mentioned it last month of Mama Anna and Mama Martha and the challenges that they had. But we need to make sure that when our children walks into rooms with us, and when we are in environments where they are also now exposed to the challenges that we had, then we had to sometimes take that step back, to not react, but to allow the atmosphere to intervene, to allow the atmosphere to bring that calmness concerning where we are at in season, so that we don't find ourselves fighting battles that is no more necessary to be fighting. There is no more required for us to fight, but so that we allow ourselves that time to find ourselves associating with that is meant for us in season. We're going to just continue on that in 1 second. Just a moment for me. Yes, I am actually a tea lover, yes. So I do drink coffee, but I also enjoy a cup of very good tea. And a cup of very good tea for me in the morning, because coffee sometimes is very, very strong. I know my family, Martin, my brother Martin, he lives on coffee, right? But for me, a cup of tea brings that bit of awareness, right? Because I'm gonna just have to mention this just to break the tension a bit. Coffee sometimes, coffee is good, right? It's got its very good qualities, but it allows the body to overreact most of the time. And therefore, I drink a cup of tea so that I keep that bit of sense of control. Because when you allow yourself to be overwhelmed with all the caffeine in the coffee, then you sometimes get a bit edgy with where you are at in life. And that's why I always allow myself the cup of tea. And yes, so our existing to exist, the ABC factor, just to continue on that, we are required to understand that the letter Z is the last letter of the alphabet. And we today are focusing on existing, that is the letter X. And the letter X today is just before we get to the last factor of the alphabet. And I want us to focus on our vocabularies, because our ways of speaking, our ways of reacting, our ways of communicating are really that we sometimes find ourselves in existing with the letter Z, or in existing with the letter E. And the letter E, we find one of, I think, the 5th or the 6th letter of the alphabet. But the letter Z is the last letter of the alphabet. And when we focus today on existing to exist, we allow ourselves the time when we are associated and when we are in our societies to really get our ways of speaking, our ways of appearing, our ways of reacting. Sometimes it's an education that started in primary school, but other times it's an education that is a requirement of general life lessons, right? That you sometimes get in an environment that you are associated in a certain way, because of the way that you appear, because of the way that you speak, because of the way that you approach, because of the way that you react. But therefore, AWOKH stands in season for their generation of person that comes and realizes that there's going to be someone in the room that is going to react different, that is going to speak different, that is going to have that different way of appearing. And that person therefore should be allowed their time in season, because they also have a reason for appearing. And therefore we should not ever in any season, we should not ever reject ourselves the opportunity to be in the beginning stages of existing, and therefore we allow ourselves the time to understand our different personalities, our different peoples, our different communities, our different religions. We have that openness in mindset in order to find ourselves not at the letter Z in this stage of 2022, but that we are still in our existing mindsets of a generation that knew that we started somewhere and that we are not ready to end now, but we are ready to say that we exist to exist, and we allow everyone that opportunity when we enter rooms, when we go to restaurants, when we go to places. We allow everyone their space in time, because we are all appearing there for their generation of change, and that is the generation of now. And therefore, no one has any right to prevent anyone from entering that room that they are meant to enter in season. And therefore, today, with our discussion, we really want to allow everyone that opportunity to get familiar with what do you associate with why do you easily reject on people, with why do you easily give up on people, why do you easily allow yourself to stand in a season of a generation that is still questioning, where you have the opportunity to be in a season of a generation that is prospering. So I always say that you have the opportunity to decide what it is that you associate with, to decide where it is that you find yourself at mentally, physically, emotionally. But you also have the opportunity to decide how is it that you are going to react when you enter a place and there's a trans environment and you are required to react in trans. And our motivation with taking the step back today is to say that we are going to allow ourselves to get familiar with understanding what is happening around us before we would go and react towards people. I'm not going to react and speak up against people because someone else has required me to speak up against people, but I'm going to allow myself that opportunity to get familiar with what is happening around me, so that I don't react when I react towards people in an opposing way, but so that I allow everyone that opportunity and that honest opportunity of appearing. And that is our human rights, right? That is the right of humanity to appear, and the right of humanity to have that freedom to appear. I believe that there's many laws that tries to describe these things, and that tries to explain to us where we find ourselves in season. But there's one thing that no one can set a law upon, and that is that opportunity for someone to be in the room. No one can set a law on it. I remember that those years South Africa were in the apartheid era for many, many years, because people and human beings try to set a law on something that they cannot set a law on. They try to rule with a law in a certain way that they cannot put rules on. They try to have many ways that they try to educate and prevent humanity from that freedom of being. And therefore, for many years, South Africa found themselves in war because they were trying to explain something that they cannot explain. They were trying to put a barrier on creation that they cannot put a barrier on. They were trying to put limitations on a human being that they cannot limit. And therefore, it is important for us in season, before we get angry with what is happening around us, to allow ourselves to take that step back and to be reminded that you still appear with who you are at, but you allow yourself to keep control in order to appear in a respectful manner for someone who themselves does not understand and does not know where they are at in season. And therefore, as a generation at war, we don't find ourselves at war because we are fighting battles that happened years ago. We are finding ourselves at war because we are generations that are changing on a regular basis. We change, we give birth to new generations of people. And that new generations of people, when they appear unto earth, they appear with a different mindset. And then we all find ourselves in one room, in one environment, and everyone would need to give the next one that opportunity to get familiar with the environment, so that everyone walks and appears in their own pace and in their own seasons. That is our generation of where we are at. 2022, our generation of chains. We are going to just focus on the association part in a few minutes. Just a second for me again. Yes, so I know sometimes I speak things that are very, 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 very on another level for many people because you don't sometimes know how to explain what it is that you're trying to say to the everyday person. But I believe that when you listen to the recording, you would understand where AWOKH is at in season, right? You would understand to get to know the pace that AWOKH is walking on. And we're not in a season where we're gonna focus on those issues only. There are certain aspect or a certain topic, but I have always said that AWOKH is including the whole discussion into the room, right? AWOKH makes place for the whole community in the area. We make space for everyone in the room, and therefore when we enter a room, I myself am very, when I enter restaurants, I myself am a very funny person. So I know people would look at me and get to know me in a very, very strange way because I am really getting familiar with where I'm at. And sometimes you sometimes just have to give people their space. You just sometimes have to give people their time. We don't need everyone coming to interfere with us when we are also just another family or another person in a room. We don't really want to find ourselves being limited when we are a free generation. When we enter a free room, we don't want to feel any limitations. Because remember, if you have someone that steps into a room and it is a human being, and you try to add a limit, then you're gonna find yourself challenging the human being, and therefore you sometimes take a step back and you say, let me allow to get to find the person that is in the room. Let me not look at the skin color, let me not look at the difference of the person, let me not look at the nationality, let me not look at how the person is dressed, let me not look at the religious differences, let me not look at the person's history, but let me find the person that is appearing in the room. And that is important for us today. It is not to go and associate when we are in the room. We are now on factor 2, that is our association factor. And our association factor is the visibility, the trueness, and the challenge. And when we focus now on our association factor, we're gonna focus on what is visible in the room, right? Who is it that is appearing in the room? So that when you enter a place and you are being challenged with someone who has entered the room that looks a bit different, that is reacting a bit different, there is a different type of religion, you allow yourself to get to know not the way the person is dressed, not the religion based and connected to the person, not the skin color that you see, but you allow yourself that time to get to know the person who has entered the room. There is something new for the season, and I know I sometimes challenge us with getting it right, with explaining it in a way that our listeners would know and would really understand where we are in season. But we really sometimes have to allow ourselves that time to get familiar with the visibility of what is it that you see in the room. Who is it that you need to associate yourself with that has entered the room? What is the true factor about that person? And whenever there's a challenge, you allow yourself to tell yourself that the visibility of the season is that in 2018, we were somewhere else. In 2018, we were in a generation that were focused so much on traditional differences, that were focused so much on the things that we didn't yet know that we were finding ourselves at in season. In 2019, we were introduced with a bit of a truth factor concerning us, because the bit of the truth factor came with the challenge of 2020-21. So when we started to really be challenged with the scope COVID season, we had the opportunity to get to know that there is truth concerning us, that there is no more that barrier of religion, there's no more that barrier of church, there's no more that barrier of white and black, there's no more that barrier of what traditions that you had before these years, but you were challenged in such a way that you had to get to know the visibility of the person that appears before you. You were required in 2019 to get to know the true factor of the person that is standing in front of you. Because remember, we were now challenged with so many things, but the requirement in life, the life lesson taught in 2019 is you have got to allow yourself to get to know the person that is standing in front of you. And that is our stronger factor, our stronger requirement that we were challenged with in 2019. And therefore, when we allowed ourselves to be in 2021, we allowed ourselves to get to know that yes, there were challenges, but yes, I'm also required to get to know myself amidst the challenges that there is, to get to know my environment amidst the challenges that there is, to get to know my mental state, my physical state, my emotional state amidst the challenges that there is, to get to know that with everything that there is, there was existence, there was a book written, there was a Genesis 1, and with the Genesis 1 that there was in many years ago, there was a generation that were required to say what it is that they need to say. And yes, there was a tradition of Genesis 1, but there was also a generation of trueness that was appearing before you. And with the generation of trueness, there was also a revelation of who it is that you truly are. And therefore, in this season, we have taken a step back from that mindset of being mentally in church and being mentally over spiritual, but we have allowed ourselves that opportunity to accept everyone equally for where we are at our different paces in life. And therefore, our society, and when you find yourself appearing with understanding that yes, there was Genesis 1, and Genesis 1 educated us in a certain way. And then we have gotten to know, yes, there was also the truth factor, and the truth factor is that you are now in 2022. And then you also have to allow yourself to get to know that yes, there's also going to be your challenging factors, and your challenging factors are the wars and the things that are happening around you, that you're also going to have to say that I understand what is happening, but I'm also required to react on my own pace, to speak what whenever I'm meant to speak what, to not say when I'm not meant to say, and to allow myself that opportunity to appear with that truth back to me without adding any hindrances, any barriers, any obstacles on where I'm at in my season. And I want to really allow ourselves to really speak about something that I have gotten familiar with, and I'm going to mention it, as I don't know if anyone is familiar with the Tokyo Milan shows that America used to have. And I'm reminded that when we had our Tokyo Milan experiences, I'm reminded that there was a generation of women that had the opportunity to now voice for the freedom of women. And I remember discussing this and just having to overthink it during this weekend, that the Tokyo Milan woman was a woman that was required to appear. And when she was required to appear, she had to appear with that trueness of knowing who she is in season. And when she was required to appear, she was sometimes required to dress in a way that she would not at all times might be agreeing with. She might be required to walk in a certain way that might not be true to herself. She would be required to walk when people tell her to walk that might not be true to her. She would be required to stop when someone else requires her to stop, when it's sometimes not her own requirement and reaction. She would be required to walk in someone else's shoes that sometimes might not have been her own shoes, but in every challenge that the Tokyo Milan woman were exposed to, she was required to be true to herself, and she was required to stay true during her challenge in season. And I'm reminded of our Tokyo Milan woman that came, that stepped up and that said that even though I might be exposed to the vulnerable side of the woman, I'm allowed and required to appear with being a woman. That even though I'm required to expose my vulnerability to a generation that want to know the woman of today, I'm required to make sure that I still own that true step that is me within that step that I take that someone else wants me to take. And I'm reminded that sometimes in life, people sign agreements, they sign contracts, they sign all of these things. And I remember when I used to watch the Tokyo Milan shows, when I used to watch their every reaction, when I used to watch their every appearance, when I used to watch the shoes that they were wearing, the way that they had to appear strong on those challenging shoes, that the way they had to appear and endure with walking on those shoes, that sometimes it was a bit challenging for them. Sometimes it was physically challenged for them. Sometimes you could see the mental challenge and the requirement of them to appear. But I'm required to understand in season the lesson that I learned while I was watching the Tokyo Milan show during those years. And I remember watching Tyra Banks and a team, and I remember this woman had the opportunity to get to know their true selves, because with every step that you take in life is a step that you take to get to know whether your true self. You get familiar with your every reaction, you get familiar with how you react, you get familiar with your pace of walk, you get familiar with your strength in season. Because remember, if you request someone to wear a certain shoe in time, if you request someone to wear a certain, maybe a Dolce Gabbana heel in season, that person would need to get familiar with their strength in order to be walking on the shoe. And I remember admiring those Tokyo Milan women. I remember saying that this woman had the opportunity to get to know themselves in season, to get that visibility of knowing who they are, of knowing and understanding the shoes that they walk in, of knowing and understanding the strength that they have been created in. And I used to watch these shows every season to just listen to the story that I'm being educated concerning a generation of women. To listen to, not only watching a modeling show, to not only watch a Miss World show in season, but to understand the everyday woman, the challenge of the everyday woman, the requirement of the everyday woman that has to appear in season, that has the opportunity to get to know ourselves, that sometimes we are going to be challenged as a generation when we get to know ourselves, that sometimes we are going to have to give the extra mile in order to get to know ourselves, that sometimes there's some of us who signs those agreements and we don't know whether the agreements are going yay or nay in season. We don't know what the agreements are linked to, but we have that opportunity of trueness. We have that opportunity to appear with being free of knowing who you are, no matter what you are being binded with, no matter the association factors in season, no matter the challenges of 2021, no matter the mistakes of yesterday, no matter the mistakes of 2018, no matter the mistakes that those women had in season, but they had the opportunity to be the woman walking freely, and the woman introducing the freedom of an everyday woman unto generations of women who at this stage and era finds themselves in a challenging season. Some women might be in countries that they are still being oppressed, that they are still being abused, that they are still being manipulated. But I'm reminded of the Tokyo Milan woman who stepped up for women who were in abuse. They stepped up and they appeared for those women who were having to exploit themselves, who were having to show themselves as being exposed, who were having to show their vulnerable side to this world, and sometimes their vulnerability were manipulated, but they had that opportunity of trueness, that opportunity of being themselves when they walk in those shoes. And that is our generation of 2022. It is that generation of getting to know your opportunity of knowing that, yes, I was vulnerable in some stage in my life. Yes, I was vulnerable and I might have been abused and I might have been exposed to many things, but there's one thing that is true to myself, and that is me. That is me walking in these shoes. That is something that no one can take away from us. And that is that, yes, we were vulnerable. And when we were vulnerable, people might have manipulated the situation in some what way. And when you are vulnerable, you are sometimes the weaker you. And when people get to know the weaker you, they sometimes try to take advantage of the weaker appearance that they see in season. But I am reminded with existing to exist today, that when you are vulnerable, remember, you might be exposed to many things, but the true strength of you is a strength that not many can stand against. And therefore, when you stand in season, you don't negotiate your strength with anyone. You don't negotiate that trueness with anyone. You don't negotiate who you are with anyone. You don't negotiate your environment with anyone. You associate with being true to yourself. You associate with walking in those shoes and with appearing with that truth factor of you. You get to know that you are in your community, that you are in your society, that you are entering that restaurant, that you are entering that workplace, but knowing that no one can compete with the strength of who you are. And that is the truth factor. That is the prospering factor in every season. That yes, there's a society, and yes, the society comes with many differences, and yes, someone might be stronger than you, and yes, someone might seem that they have more power than you. But one thing that you should always tell yourself is that there's one thing that no one can negotiate with, and that is me. There's one thing that no one can mimic, and that is me. There's one thing that no one can try and add up to, and that is they cannot add up to me. That is why I always mention my name when I say that I'm Rabia Elisa, and I'm standing for a season of change. I'm standing with AWOKH in a different era, in a different generation, with a different mindset. And my mindset is getting to know where I'm at in season and keeping with my pace. And yes, my pace can sometimes be challenging. Yes, my pace can sometimes be with a lot of things. Yes, my pace can sometimes have a lot of things attached to it. Yes, there can sometimes be many things that people want to say about me. But one thing that they can not stand against, that is the presence of me, the presence of who I've been born to be. And therefore, you allow yourself that opportunity to associate with that factor of you, no matter your environment, no matter your challenges, but you associate with that factor of you every time, and that will continuously be the winner you. And then I want to, before I end today's discussion, I want to focus on the attitude to exist, and therefore our seasons are an opportunity for us to get to know our stronger us in season, right? So whenever I call our seasons, sometimes our challenges, right? Because remember, our seasons comes in winter, and winter might be a bit challenging for the autumn season, because winter comes with a strength while autumn season is still there, right? Because autumn season is not gonna give way, but autumn season is still there, and then winter comes and winter says, bang, but I'm here. And that is us in season. Sometimes there's gonna be the next person that enters the room with a bang. And while that person enters the room with a bang, you have got to know you in season, and you have got to know your stronger you in season in order to appear with that. You have got to know that, you know what, this person is appearing, but I'm also appearing, and I'm also here from existence, and I'm also here educating where I'm at in season. Yes, there's all of these speakers and there's all of these motivators, but there's also Rabia Elise, and that is one thing that no one else in season can compete with, that no one else can challenge you with, that nothing can challenge you with. Yes, we have our autumn season, our strongest season that appears for our winter season. Yes, we have our winter season that is our strongest seasons that appears for another spring blossoming season. Because remember, the strength of spring is, spring doesn't appear with that strength of saying, bang, here I am, but spring steps in with the silent and the softness in season. And when the spring season steps in, it steps in with a quietness, and it just starts to appear. And when it appears, the spring season says, I know my blossoming, I know my strength. I don't have to make my strength visible to anywhere in this world. I don't have to make my strength known to any part of creation, because I know who I am honestly. And that is us as a generation in seasons. We have gotten to know the stronger us, because with every season that changes, so generations change us, and so people change us. So we change mentally, so we get familiar with our environments in seasons, and so we step out every day in getting familiar with getting to find our different requirements in season. That is us. We can't go with the attitude of yesterday. That is an attitude of ignorance, an attitude of abuse, an attitude of manipulation, an attitude of saying that you're not right to do this and you're not right to do that. But we need to allow ourselves the time to get to know and to get to be awoken with a stronger you in season. I know I always say a lot, but this is our color talk today. This is our people of color discussion today. And thank you to those guys who have tuned in today. And yes, we know that people are constantly listening into our discussions, and we know that our time differences might be a bit different, but we thank everyone who always tunes into our discussions. That is our society, our generation of change, our generation with that mindset of knowing where you are at in a generation and where our generation is at. And that is our generation that says that mentally we are challenged with this specific area, but physically we are prospering with getting to know that we are required to be the stronger us that appears mentally well. Even if it's an autumn season, and even if winter comes and winter says, wow, where are you? Then the spring season says, I am ready to be here. And that is us in seasons. There's no time to still wait sometimes. Sometimes we're going to have to be loud about it. We're going to have to say it the way it is. We're not going to have to focus on our mistakes. We're not going to have to focus on what people say about us. But we're gonna have to allow ourselves that opportunity to get to know who you are, to get familiar with the stronger you, to get to walk with the you in every season, and to get to appear with knowing that socially your economy is depending on the weather outside, and the weather outside is depending and each and every one of us. We are all depending on one another. We are all dependent on each and every one another. And therefore, when our economy changes, we realize that people would need to be going into their workplaces in order to make sure that there's manufacturing happening, that there's production happening, that there is packaging happening, that there is foods on the tables. And that is us taking hands in season. Yes, our society might be challenging. We might take time to get familiar with what we associate with. We might take time to find our mental state, our physical state. We are required to prosper, and we are required to say that our economy is dependent on each and every one of our reactions in season. And therefore, our environment is our seasons of change. That is us today that allows ourselves that opportunity every month to listen to our discussions and to say that with AWOKH, you're either going to be AWOKH or you're going gonna be AWOKH. But you're gonna have to find yourself in season in order to get to know the stronger you. You exist to exist in every season. You know where you exist from. You don't manipulate yourself. You don't manipulate others. You don't pull yourself out of a situation. You don't go and mentally sit and be challenged with what is happening. But you be the stronger. You're realizing that, remember, when winter season appears, then autumn season is still there. Then winter season just says boah, and then autumn season would need to be ready to react. And remember, spring season does not warn winter season that spring season is going to appear. No, winter season is there, and then spring season enters softly into the room. And while winter season is still there being strong, then strength is saying, then while winter season is saying that I am the stronger one in season, then spring season appears softly, and then spring season says, but I know my strength because I also exist from existence. And then spring season makes the blossoming for us. And then remember, when summer season appears, summer season just says, wow, this is a job well done. And this is where we are at for generations. We need to be allowing our pace. We need to be knowing when to react fast. We need to be knowing how to react. We need to be knowing where we react from, but we need to stay true to ourselves in everything that we are, where we are at. That is us, 2022, our month of April, existing to exist. Let us continue to do this, and let us continue to be the stronger us every season. Have a stunning, stunning, stunning week further.